Under the Radar is a web radio that unites three people that use their spoken words powerfully. Alex, Céline, and Marco are here to see and speak, to see what is being played instantly, honestly, without any complacency for themselves or for the other, to see precisely and to speak freely, to reveal their own power. The first recordings will give you the tonality of the exchanges, right here.
Bonjour Céline.
Salut Alex.
Hi Céline. Hi Alex. You wanted us to come on a subject on the impact of our spoken words, vibrational spoken words, on the distortion of the collective scenarios. Yes, so it's something that came this morning when we walked. And we never stopped talking. There's all kinds of things that we talk about. And what came to me was this interrogation or the positioning or non-positioning of certain people with what's being played collectively and for them. So it brought me, what came as information is that our individual power, when it's well positioned and it's inhabited by it, I saw like when we see water, when it does like ripples, and I saw these ripples that were in expansion, evidently. The more we are in power, the more there's that expansion. I also saw this like these vibrational waves and frequencies that perturbed, hacked the system to impose and test what we know. So in fact, I saw like, it was like a distortion. That's the word that came right away. When you asked me what I wanted to say, what came at that subject, and that's what it was. Meaning that to be in our power is exercised also by speech. Speech that emits with our etherical fields, but also the emission, the sonar emission by our voice. So I see all these frequencies that are in expansion and go like, take away all the cards that are in front of us, and all the people that emit their positionings with their speech and what they're asking for definitively. I saw this. What comes, Alex says, when you speak of this is two types of impact of our speech. It's the individual impact, meaning to speak of what we observe, to speak of what we are conscious of, and it can eventually generate an impact in what is concrete, in the material, in our experience of life that is, or that concerns us directly. And then the second aspect is the impact with the collective. And that becomes possible when the words or the spoken words are public. And that's how I see it today. And I also see the temptations or tentatives to minimize that impact, meaning that yesterday afternoon, today I'm going to talk to you of what happened to me. There was like a slowdown, a phenomenon of slowdown or a doubt. Really, what am I doing? Really, is it by speaking that I'm going to be able to influence the collective action on the collective concrete things? And that's what emerged from this, the doubt. And you and I, we know that as soon as there's doubt, it's synonym of temptation of deterrent or interference. Because our power goes right to this, right to that point, by using the same strategies or methods that these entities interfere with us. We have the capacity also to hack, like you're saying, meaning that it shows me that the speech that we can exchange with each other or with others can have an influence on the collective program, meaning that if we position ourselves individually on a subject that will concern the ensemble, as an example, like the other day was the Olympic Games, it's a way of affirming high and strong that the temptation of manipulation or lies that are imposed on us can be seen. And once it's seen, there is it's like readjustment of these entities, meaning there's tests and observations what can be done on a human being. We're like a laboratory here, like a great laboratory. There's a possibility for the human being to no longer consider himself like a creature, but like, or a victim of these entities, but to find again your own power and of our own capacity of influencing what's happening. Meaning that what happened these last few hours made me become aware of this, is that there's also like a condition, I was going to say, that it needs to be sitting down in a position that is clear, or an alignment in a clear of who we are, but it's not inaccessible. It's not something that is complex to find again. It's something that can be reinstalled quite simply and immediately if we say or we remind ourselves who we are or the power that we have. That's what comes to continue. And Céline says yes, concerning that famous doubt that went through you or to come in, like, tease you, the idea is not to have an objective or to have an objective that we can attack a collective or to go against a people, a half of a people, or a certain mass of population. The idea is, because there, for my part, it's, false route doing this. The idea is really to integrate this power of just sitting it inside of us, and I'm really rambling on and saying the same things, but it's to feel ourselves in this right to say no, to position ourselves, to ask that it stops. Because when we see that it's anti-human, anti-life, at what moment can we emit the idea that it doesn't serve anything to speak? That is like the ego and the intellect that would be en route without speaking of the parasites and thoughts, etc. But it's just to recenter ourselves on who we are. Like you're saying, you're speaking of a laboratory of this planet. What I said and I evoked where I worked, it was for me a fabulous laboratory to observe and to experiment with my positioning. It was really extremely like in a learning environment, and I've accustomed to say that I am my own laboratory. So effectively, the circus in the circus, the vice behind the vice, I am my laboratory in a bigger laboratory that is the earth, and my concrete world also. These visions, how could we say this, at many stages, many levels. For my part, it's quite interesting. I know that not everyone has this faculty, but the simplicity is of rigor today, is to put order. When we are not well, when we're not going well, there's a story of order or disorder, or being in your acts or not in your acts. So if we stay in this simplicity of observing just this, we already come to a point to put ourselves in our center. With this power or this vibration that we emanate, effectively, we are not on an activism in the concrete world. We are just realigning our power, and that action passes on subtle planes or in subtle worlds. Alex is saying, I'm coming back on the activism. Effectively, it can be distinguished on an action that leaves on the concrete world, meaning to do things materialistically that would go against perversion of the system that is starting to impose itself visibly, of all time, but it's imposing itself visibly now. And it's an idea that speaks to me a lot. And that metaphor speaks to me, the metaphor of hacking, because we are in the system.
Dernièrement, je lisais un commentaire où la personne disait
I read a comment lately that said, I'm not from this world, but when I read this, of course I am from this world. Yes, I am from this world, meaning I am localized in this world and outside of this world. If I forget that I am localized inside of this world, I will forget an important part, and I forget my capacity to influence, to not only by my actions and matter, but also by words that had a vibrational influence and will materialize itself after a while. It's two different things. It's two starting points that are different. There's on one side, you start in matter, and the other side, you start with the subtle worlds. And they're measurable in the same way. That's what I love to see right now. And to remind myself, because the doubt of that power is real, and it really slows me down. Do you want to add something, Céline? Yes, I just wanted to add that in the concrete part, certain people could do manifestations, for example, reunite, etc. I never did this. For my part, it's like the description that comes is that there's avatars that are in agitation, but they're not in their globality. However, there's a question in face of entities that are in their globality, meaning that they are at the same time in the occult, but also in matter. If the avatar that we are doesn't recreate its power with its spirit in all his bodies and etherical fields, he's only an avatar that is agitated or will agitate himself. We'll say it in another way, and participates to our Barnum. So the globality, the power of the individual is to apprehend in its globality. And it is in this globality that the vibrations, the frequencies will go forward, meaning that it will go in the concrete world, but also in the subtle worlds. And it needs to go where it needs to go. I don't need to put a postal address. It will go where it needs to go when I am in my power. So it's interesting to see also when you say it's verifiable in the concrete worlds. Effectively, when we are in this globality there, in that power, when we ask for certain things to stop, for an example, when we liberated on the subtle worlds, when we're be submitted and we're in attacks and how it's happening, where it's coming from, when we practice to liberate this, we see that it will stop. The concrete worlds will prove it to us. When we take our power and we're not passive, victim, or in submission, and that we are actor. Because to observe, yes, but if you don't act after your observation by emitting your words, even in your concrete world, with someone that you're working with, for example, and you're showing him how it's being played and it's unacceptable for you, well then nothing will happen. There's not the globality that will be an expansion all of a sudden and destroys a temptation to attack you or to interfere by situation or person or globe. So the globality is important to consider. Alex is saying always to continue on this subject. Two things came to mind. First is the nature of the tests that are presented to us. I'm going to say it like this.
Ils visent
They
à nous
have an
faire
objective
croire
to make us
impuissants face à ce qui
believe
se
that
passe.
we're
Le
not
résultat,
powerful in front of what's
c'est
happening.
le
The
sentiment
result
d'impuissance
is
qui se
the
dégage. Et le
feeling
côté fatalité, en fait. Le côté,
like
bon, bah,
it's a
si c'est
fatality.
d'un programme, je peux rien, je peux
So,
pas
well,
lutter
if it's a
contre le
program,
programme.
I can't go against a
Ça, c'était le
program.
premier point.
Bullshit,
Bullshit.
Céline is saying.
Premier point.
Alex is saying bullshit.
Deuxième point,
First
quand
point.
tu
Second
fais part
point,
de
Alex adds, when you're
de tous les
speaking of
aspects de
all
l'humain
the
à
aspects of the
considérer,
human being to
et que tu
consider,
redécris
and that you
les différentes
redescribe the
étapes,
different
il y a
steps, there's observation,
il y a l'intégration,
there's integration,
il y a l'action.
there's action.
Et l'intégration, j'avais
And
envie
integration, I
d'ajouter,
wanted to
compléter à ce
add
que tu
and
dis,
complete
qu'elle
what
se
you were
décrète
saying.
pas.
It's not
Pour
decreted.
ma part, en fait,
For my
ça a été
part,
dans un premier
it
temps
was firstly done
une propension
in like
à appliquer certains principes,
like to apply
être dans
certain principles,
l'application
to apply
à être dans la mise en
things,
œuvre de
to
procédures presque,
act
tu sais.
in a
C'est-à-dire qu'il y avait la
procedures.
compréhension intellectuelle
There
du
was the
fonctionnement, comment
intellectual
ça se passait. Et
understanding
je me
of what
retrouvais en
was
situation
happening,
d'appliquer.
and then I
Et il y
needed to
avait
find myself
potentiellement
in
la frustration de pas
situations
voir
to
justement le
apply, and then the
résultat.
frustration of
Et
not seeing the
l'intégration
result.
dont on
In the
parle,
integration that we're
témoigner
speaking of,
Pour le coup,
I wanted to
c'est pas en la
testify that it's
décrétant,
not
c'est
by
pas en disant,
decreting it, it's
je
not
veux
by saying
intégrer
I
ce qui
want
se
to
dit.
integrate
C'est
what's
quand t'es
being
prêt, tu
said.
intègres.
It's when you're ready,
Quand
you
t'es prêt, en
integrate.
fait,
When you're
l'intégration,
ready,
moi, je le
the integration,
traduis
I will
en
translate it
disant
by
que c'est
saying
une mise en œuvre
it's like
dans
putting it
ton-
at
dans
work
ton
in
quotidien,
your daily
à ton
life,
rythme,
at
à
your
ta
rhythm,
façon de faire.
at your way
Quand
of
t'en fais
doing
quelque chose
things.
qui
When
est
you do
propre,
things your
qui
way,
passe pas par la
and it
volonté,
doesn't
en fait,
pass
de
by the
l'avatar,
will of the
qui
avatar,
peut être,
that it can
comment
be,
dire,
how
peut
do I
être,
say it,
lui, impatient
like
que ça
impatient
se mette en
of
place,
that it
tu
would
vois.
be put in
Mais c'est
place.
différent de ça.
But it's
Et
different
ça,
from
je
this.
peux en témoigner
And
parce
that I
que
can
je suis en
testify
train
to
de
this because I'm
l'expérimenter.
experimenting it
Et
now.
je fais un petit retour
And
en arrière,
I'm
tu sais,
coming back
pour parler
to speak
de l'activisme, en fait.
of
Et tu vois,
activism,
pour parler de la
to
différence entre
speak about the difference
les différentes façons
between
d'agir.
the different ways of acting.
On a parlé récemment, en
We
fait, du
spoke
coco, tu sais, on
recently
faisait des parallèles
of
avec les
that
JO
we
et
were
le coco.
doing
Pendant
parallels
les JO,
between
j'étais en
the
situation
Olympic
de
Games,
réaliser de
and in the Olympic
l'activisme,
Games, I
en cherchant à
was
vouloir convaincre
searching
les
to
restaurateurs,
convince
en voulant convaincre
the
les personnes de ma
restorations
famille, en
or
voulant convaincre, en étant dans
convincing
la
my
conviction
families
et en voulant
in
amener l'autre à
being
voir comme moi je
in
pouvais
this
voir. Et ça,
conviction
j'ai mis
to
6
show
mois,
the
en fait,
other
avant
one to see
d'arrêter
how I
et de
saw.
constater que c'était
And for
inutile.
6 months, I
Aujourd'hui,
saw that it was
j'expérimente une autre
useless.
façon d'agir
And now I'm
qui passe pas
experiencing another
nécessairement
way
par
of doing it
l'action
that doesn't
matérielle
pass by the
dans un
material
premier temps,
action
mais qui
first,
commence en fait
but
dans la
starts
vibration,
in the
qui
vibration,
commence en
that
décrétant
starts by
subtilement
decreting
parlant, et
subtly,
qui ensuite
and
se met en
then
place.
puts
Et c'est
itself
plus
in
moi
place.
qui
And it's
décide
no longer
réellement de la
me
mise
that
en place, c'est la part
decides,
subtile qui me
but it's
concerne,
the
c'est
subtle
l'esprit en
worlds,
fait
it's the
qui
spirit
intervient
that
et qui crée la
intervenes, it
condition
creates a condition
qui est à l'image de
that
ce que l'avatar
is at
il
the
a
image of the
il a
avatar that
décrété, tu vois. Et c'est
decreted
là qu'il y
or
a quelque
emitted.
chose que je
And
commence
that's what
à
I'm
appréhender,
starting
mais
to
à
apprehend and
expérimenter, pas
experiment,
seulement à comprendre
not
intellectuellement,
only to understand
c'est la
intellectually,
réconciliation
but it's the
entre ces deux
reconciliation
parts-là.
between
Et
these
ça
two
fait écho
parts,
à
and it
pas à
echoes
l'intégrité, mais au côté
to
intégral dont tu
the
parles, qui
integral
est,
part that you're
important,
speaking of,
globalité,
the
qui est
globality
considérée.
to
Oui,
consider.
absolument.
Céline says yes,
Bah, j'ai envie de
absolutely.
te dire que tu viens de démontrer
You
quelque
just
part
showed
le pourquoi ça fonctionne
how
pas
it doesn't
vraiment
really
d'entrée.
work to
C'est parce
enter,
que il y a cette
because
globalité
there's
qui
that
n'est pas,
globality that is not
appréhendée, qui
apprehended,
n'est pas,
that is not,
c'est tellement
it's so
abstrait. Il n'y a
abstract.
pas à essayer
But
de voir une
you don't
forme.
have to see
Il n'y
a
a pas à essayer de
form.
voir
It's
une
not to try to
forme,
see a
de
form
s'imaginer
or
une
to
forme.
imagine a
Il y a
form.
cette
There is
évidence
this evidence
que tu n'es pas
that you are
seulement
not
un
only an
avatar,
avatar,
que tu n'es pas un
that you are
avatar
not
uniquement
uniquely an
marionnette,
avatar
sans possibilité
without a possibility
d'émettre,
d'influer.
d'exiger,
of emitting
d'influer.
or
C'est
asking
parce
or
que on est
influencing.
encore
It's because
dans
we're
cette
still in
histoire, je
this
suis un
story
petit
that I am
humain.
a small
Ouais, je
human.
grandis un
Yeah,
peu.
I'm growing
Oh,
up a little
ok,
bit.
je peux dire, je veux
I
ci,
can
je veux
say
ça.
that I want
Mais c'est
this or
tellement
that, but
timide,
it's
tout
so
ça.
shy,
C'est
all of
encore
this.
timide.
It's very shy
C'est encore timide parce que ça n'a
because it
ça n'a pas
doesn't,
réussi à intégrer à quel
it
point
hasn't
l'humain
succeeded to integrate
puissant.
how the human being is
L'humain est
powerful
grand.
and
Et
great,
l'humain
and
n'a
how the
pas
human
à
being
obéir et à
doesn't need to
subir
obey
tout ce
or be
bordel,
in this
tant
submissive
sur le plan
position
terrestre
of
que dans le
everything
plan
or the bullshit
subtil.
that is happening
Parce que ce qui
in
se
the
joue en
material
bas se joue
world
en haut et
or in the
vice-versa.
subtle worlds,
Donc
because
la
what
mer
is
qu'on a
being
ici,
played
c'est
up
pas mieux
is above,
dans
is below.
l'astral.
And
Ça,
it's
c'est
not
juste
better
une
in the
parenthèse
astral
pour ceux
world,
qui
but that's
penseraient
just
que
a
l'astral, il y a encore,
parenthesis
des êtres merveilleux.
to say that
On n'est pas
people
sur
are
ça.
still thinking that astral
Bien
world is
évidemment.
marvelous. We're not on
La-
this,
l'idée
evidently.
d'intellectualiser
The
ou
idea of
voir
intellectualizing
quelle est
or
ma
to see what is my
partition,
subtle
etc.
part in all of this,
C'est encore un
it's
peu
still
complexe
a little
peut-être
bit
pour certains
complex
qui
for
sont
certain
encore
beings that are still in
dans
the
l'intellectualisation que l'âme,
intellectualization that the
c'est ça
soul,
ma conscience.
that is my consciousness.
ça reste encore
and
spirituel.
it
L'âme,
still
c'est pas la
stays
conscience. Il y a la
spiritual.
conscience de
The
l'âme, il y a la
soul,
conscience
there's a
de-
consciousness of soul.
Il y a plein de schémas qui
There's
peuvent être
many
faits,
drawings
il y en
that
a
can
qui
be
aiment bien
done.
faire des schémas,
Some
moi,
love to
non.
do drawings, but I
Mais,
don't.
pour simplifier,
But to simplify,
on est au-delà
we are
de cette
beyond
âme dont tout le
this
monde parle, y
soul
compris les
that
poètes,
everyone is
etc.
speaking
On
of,
n'arrive
even
pas à
in
en
the
sortir.
poets. And we can't
Non,
come out of
c'est
this.
ta partie
But no,
subtile,
it's
ta
your
partie
subtle part,
critique,
spirit,
ou la conscience
where
supérieure, peu importe.
the
mais bon,
superior
moi, je vais pas
consciousness.
faire un
Whatever the
procès
words, I'm
qui
not
dira,
going
on
to
est
do a
tous
process
ici.
to whoever does this word, says
Mais
this
c'est
word
de
or
voir
not,
sa globalité.
but it's to see your
On est
globality.
encore en vision
We are still
étriquée.
in a
On
small
commence à peine à
vision.
regarder par
We're
la
starting
fenêtre,
to
oh là
just
là, je
look
vois
at
un
the
morceau de moi.
through the window and see,
C'est
oh, I
ça
see a
que
part of
je remarque.
myself. That's what I'm seeing.
Et le fait que
And the
quand
fact that
quand on émet notre parole,
we
comme
emit
tu le fais
our
toi,
words
comme
like
je le
you're
fais moi,
doing it and I'm doing
avec
it,
Marco,
or with Marco.
quand on émet
When we
notre
emit
parole comme
our
ça sur
words like
WebRadio
this,
ou
like
sur
on our
chacun
web
des
radio or
médias
our
respectifs,
podcasts or our individual media,
je kiffe les
I
commentaires
love the
parce
comments
que moi je vois
because
des
I
puissances en
see
face de moi, des
powers
puissances
in front of
individuelles.
me, individual
C'est comme
powers.
si
It's like
on partageait
we
on
would
s'envoyait de
share
l'énergie qui rallume l'autre et vice versa,
the energy
sans prendre
for
de
each other,
l'énergie à l'autre,
but not
sans
taking
vouloir,
the energy of the other,
instruire
not
l'autre.
wanting to
Tu dois
instruct the
faire
other.
comme
You need
ci,
to
tu
do
dois faire
this
comme
or
ça.
that, or
Il y a-
like
il
this
y a
or
des
like that.
choses à
There's
juste,
things to just
intégrer.
integrate.
La base, c'est
The foundation is
d'intégrer sa globalité,
to
ne plus se voir
integrate
comme
your
un morceau,
globality, not to see yourself as a piece,
un morceau de chiffon.
a piece of like tissue.
Je vais illustrer ce
Alex
que
is
tu dis.
going. It says, "I'm going to illustrate
ma
what you're
façon
saying
de-
in my way
de le parler, tu
of
sais, cette
speaking of
globalité-là.
this
Mhm.
Alors
globality."
moi, je résume en disant
I'm
il y a une part matérielle de
resuming
l'humain, il y a une part
Is that there's a
subtile, une part
subtle
vibratoire.
part in the
Et c'est
human
cette part-là
being
qui
and a
est pas
vibrational
évidente
part,
au
and that's
début à
part
appréhender,
that's
parce qu'on
not
aime bien mettre
evident
des formes.
to apprehend
Il y a
because
un
we
terme
love
un
to
peu
put a
compliqué qui
form.
dit ça,
There's
c'est
a
on aime
complicated term
anthropomorphiser,
is
c'est-à-dire
that
qu'à
we
partir du
love
moment où ça ressemble
to
pas à l'humain, ou ça ressemble pas à un
mortifies.
corps, ou ça ressemble pas à quelque chose, on
If it
attend de
doesn't
voir
look
un
like
esprit qui a la
something,
forme de quelque chose.
but
qu'on
we're
connaît.
waiting
Ouais.
to see the
Et ça,
spirit in a
c'est,
form
ça peut être un
that we know,
retardateur.
but that can slow us
C'est-à-dire
down.
que
Meaning
comme on n'a
that
pas vu, comme on n'a pas eu
since
de
we haven't
démonstration en
seen
fait,
or
de
we
ça,
haven't had a
on s'attend à quelque
demonstration
chose
of
de
this, we're
particulier.
waiting for
Que si,
something particular.
comme tu disais tout à l'heure
Like
par
you were saying a
rapport aux
while
adresses,
ago, like with
si
an
tu
address.
t'attends pas
If you're
à ce
not
que ce soit
waiting
formé de telle
for
ou telle
something to
façon,
be formed in a certain
eh ben,
way,
on se débarrasse en fait,
then we
d'une attente
liberate
que l'humain peut avoir pour
an
être
attempt
dans la compréhension.
for the human being to be in
Tu
this
vois, et du
comprehension.
coup, ça simplifie
And it
d'autant plus parce que
simplifies it even
on n'a
more
pas besoin
because we don't
d'attestation de ça,
need an
simplement
attestation
de
of this,
réinstaller l'idée
but just to
que,
reinstall
ok,
the
il y a
idea
cette
that,
dimension-là
okay, there is this
qui est
dimension
intégrée. Et il y a
that
une
is
part très
integrated. There's a
importante
part
de
that's
notre
very important,
pouvoir, de
of
notre
our power
puissance qui réside à
that
cet endroit-là.
resides in
C'est-à-dire
this
que
place.
c'est pas parce que c'est pas
It's not because
visible,
it's not
c'est pas
visible,
formé
it's
comme on
not
peut avoir des
formed
formes
like
dans la matière,
we want to
que
see
c'est pas
forms in
réel.
matter, that it's not
Et l'évidence
real.
dont on parle à un
And the
moment
evidence
donné,
that we're
elle se
speaking
traduit en
of
disant
is
c'est ça,
translated by
c'est ça, elle s'installe.
by
Tu le sais
saying,
quand ça s'installe.
yes,
Exactement.
you
Et tu
know
doutes
when
plus,
it's
en fait. Il n'y a
installed.
plus de doute.
There's no more
Et
doubt
effectivement, tu
about it.
reprends
And effectively,
la
you
mesure que tu n'es
take
pas
the
seulement la
measure that you are
marionnette
no
qui est
longer
soumise à un programme.
just this
Ça aussi, cette
avatar
histoire de
submitted to
programmation,
this
c'est
program.
un joli
Of
fourrage.
course,
C'est-à-dire que tant qu'on en reste là,
when
on
we're in
reste
this program and we
victimes
stay like
de
this, we are a
l'esprit qui
victim of the
conditionne,
spirit that
de l'esprit
conditions,
qui crée
spirit that creates
l'expérience,
the
qui crée
experience,
l'événement,
that
et que
creates the
l'avatar
event, and the avatar
subit
is just submitted to the
Oui,
experimentation.
la volonté de
Because
l'esprit, la volonté de la
Céline is
conscience,
saying
comme disent
the
certains-
will of
certaines
consciousness
personnes,
of
c'est bien
people,
joli, mais à un moment donné,
it's
quand
good, but
l'avatar,
when the avatar
ne se considère
it
plus
doesn't
comme
consider
ce
himself
petit
like
chiffon,
this
exige d'être partie
and
prenante, d'être le
wants to
partenaire,
be the
de
partnership
recouvrer cette
of
globalité.
finding its
C'est là qu'il
globality
tape du poing
again.
sur la table et qu'il dit,
And
non,
then
mais
he
moi, ces
says,
expériences de merde, j'en ai
know
marre,
these
on dit,
experiences,
ça
these
passe par une colère
bullshits that
vibratoire, à un
I'm
moment
living.
donné. À un moment
Sometimes
donné, en
there's
fait,
like a
moi, je m'appelle,
vibrational
vous faites un
hate.
câble, vous mettez l'expression
You
que
put
vous
the
voulez,
expression that you want to,
mais
but
croyez-moi, ça vibre.
believe me,
Et
it
ça,
will
c'est-
vibrate.
c'est-
And when you
c'est comme
say
si
this
c'était
and
le
want
top
this,
départ,
it's like the
le top
beginning,
départ
the
pour la
top
réunification
of this beginning,
de
the
ces
reunification
deux
of these two
parties qui n'en
parts
sont qu'une, en
that are
fait.
only
Et
one.
c'est à partir de
And
là
it's at that
qu'on sent,
moment
voilà, que
that we feel
habité
inhabited
pleinement.
fully.
Et on se sent pas
And we don't
limité à cette partie
feel
d'avatar. On
limited
peut naviguer.
limited to this avatar. We
peut-
can
Ouais,
navigate.
C'est hermétique.
ouais,
Alex
c'est-
is
c'est-
saying it's like
exponentielle.
Exponential, Céline is adding?
Expansionnelle.
Or-
Ça, cette idée-là, je voulais l'amener par rapport
Céline
au
says this
partenariat.
is
C'est-à-dire
idea
que
of partnership.
toi, tu parles du
You're
partenariat
speaking of
entre le
partnership
corps et
between
l'esprit.
the body and the
C'est
spirit.
un partenariat
It's
qui
a
s'installe
partnership
entre
that is
l'avatar et
installed
l'esprit.
between the
C'est
avatar
une étape.
and a
Pour la
spirit.
globalité.
It's a
J'entends
step
bien.
for the
En fait,
globality,
ce que je
Céline
voulais
is
dire,
saying.
c'est que ce
Alex is saying, I
partenariat-là
hear this, but this
se
partnership
vérifie aussi dans
can
la
be
matière.
verified in matter.
C'est-à-dire que si on sait que ce
Meaning
qui est
that
en haut
if
est en
we
bas,
know what
ce
above is below
partenariat,
and
c'est
below
le
is
point de départ
above,
aussi pour
that
être entendu par
partnership
les
can be
forces.
heard.
C'est-à-dire que l'autorité dont on parle en
The
fait souvent,
authority that we
elle
speak
est
of
vérifiable
often
à partir du moment où
is
on réinstalle
verifiable when
un rapport aussi qui
there is
est
a rapport
horizontal
that is
entre l'avatar
installed
et l'esprit.
between the
Il n'est
avatar
pas
and the
question
spirit.
de
There's no
faire
question
de l'esprit
of
un
making
nouveau
the
Dieu,
spirit a
ou
new
de faire de
God
l'esprit
or
quelque chose
making the
envers
spirit
lequel
of
on aurait
something
à se
that we
à se
would
remettre
need to
comme
put
certains pourraient se remettre à
ourselves on our
l'univers.
knees.
C'est-à-dire qu'à un moment donné,
No, there's a
je m'en
moment
remets à
where
personne d'autre.
I put
Il n'y a
myself.
pas à
Je m'en remets à
soumettre
rien
l'esprit.
d'autre. Et il
I
n'y a pas à
you
se
don't need
soumettre
to
à
be
l'esprit.
submitted
Ni
to
soumettre,
the
Ni
spirit
soumettre l'esprit. C'est
de-
vraiment
or in
une
a
relation de
submissive
partenariat.
position
C'est le
to the
Donc
spirit.
partenariat.
It's a
dit
partnership.
autrement, c'est le
To
deal en fait
say
dont
it
moi,
in
ça me
another
parle,
way,
en
it's
fait,
like a
cette expression-là.
deal.
On
That
entretient un deal
expression
au
speaks
sens
to
où
me, a deal
on
in
n'a
a
plus à
sense that we
subir, on
don't
n'a pas à
we're
subir
not in
des expériences qui sont
submission
souffrantes. Et
or
c'est
in a
là en fait
suffering
qu'il est possible
positions. And that's where it's
d'intervenir.
possible
Et c'est
to
là où on peut
intervene, and
contrecarrer
that's
en
where we
fait
can
des
go
problèmes.
against each
Chacun
and
dans son
every one in
individualité.
our
Moi, je vais pas
individuality.
intervenir sur tes
Céline
programmes, tu vas
says,
pas
you're not
intervenir
going to
sur les
intervene
Exactement,
on
mais
my
quand il y a des
programs
situations,
and
des
me on
événements qui nous
yours.
concernent directement tous les deux,
Alex
il
says,
y a
but there's things
possibilité
that
de
concern
rentrer
each other, and
aussi
there's a
en
possibility
échange.
to
On
exchange
pourrait
on
dire
this. And we
d'esprit
could
à
say from
esprit.
spirit to spirit.
Et en fait, voilà, il y a autre chose
And
aussi,
there's
la
something
notion
else, is the
d'exponentielle, je
notion
voulais
of
la compléter
exponential.
aussi
I wanted to
avec
complete
les
it with
contacts
the
qui
contacts
se font
the contacts
au
that are
travers les
done
commentaires, au travers les échanges qu'on
through
peut
the
avoir avec
exchanges that we can
certaines
have with
personnes
certain
dans le
people,
contexte des accompagnements qu'on propose tous les deux.
um,
Il y a
with the individual accompaniment
on
that
parle
we
à
do
un,
together.
un
We speak to
potentiellement va
one,
parler à 10 autres.
and one will speak to maybe
Vous voyez ce que je
10.
veux dire?
Do you see?
C'est-à-dire qu'il suffit de parler à
There's
un,
only need to speak
pour
to
qu'il y ait un
one, so
phénomène
that there's
de
a
ça se rallume,
phenomenon
mais ça se
of
rallume de façon
real
exponentielle.
to
Ça se
lighting
reconnecte de
up,
façon
like
exponentielle.
it
Ça se
reconnects
regroupe
in
de
an
façon
exponential
exponentielle.
way.
Et c'est en ce
And it's
sens-là
in that sense
où on devient,
there
j'allais
where
dire,
we become
dangereux, où on devient des
dangerous,
hackers
that
professionnels
we become
du
professional
système
hackers
qui
of
tente
the
de nous faire
system
croire
that is
impuissants.
trying to make us believe
on
that
revient
we're
sur
not
l'alliance.
powerful. And
On
Céline
revient
says
sur
we're coming
l'alliance.
back on the
Il y a
alliance
d'abord cette
And there's
reconnexion,
this
cette
reconnection
reconnaissance de l'avatar par rapport à
of
son
your
esprit,
avatar with your
et
spirit
vice-versa,
and vice versa,
reconnaissance mutuelle
mutual
qui amène
recognition
cette globalité,
that brings
cette
this
puissance,
globality, this power
très installée.
that is very
Il y a
installed within.
l'émission
And there's
émettre,
the
ça
podcast,
vous rencontre, vous et d'autres.
it,
Et
you're
hop, ça fait son
meeting,
bonhomme de chemin.
yourself,
Chez chacun d'entre
and
vous,
each
d'entre
and
vous, ou pas
every
du
one
tout,
of
mais
you,
c'est individuel.
but it's individual. There's
Il n'y a pas de
no
directive, de
directives,
groupe.
there's no
Il n'y a
group,
pas
there's no
de message
message for a group.
C'est
It
vraiment
is really
moi,
me
individu, toi,
as an individual, you
deux
as an individual,
individus
two
qui-
individuals that emit,
on exerce notre
we
parole.
exercise
Et
our speech,
après,
and after,
Là aussi, ça fait son bonhomme de
there
chemin.
it will,
Et chacun
will
d'entre vous,
go
chacun
on its
d'entre vous,
path,
en
and
tant
each and
qu'individu, faites
every
le
one
vôtre.
of you,
Vous
you
faites
need
le
to do
vôtre.
your own
Vous me
path.
partagez là
You
où vous
will
en
share
êtes.
where
Et
you
moi, je
are,
vois des
and I
puissances
see
individuelles.
individual
Et
powers in front of
ça,
me, and that,
vibratoirement,
vibrationally,
imaginez bien
imagine
que mes ondes,
that
mes
my
fréquences,
frequencies,
celles d'Alex,
the ones
celles
of
de
Alex, the
Marco,
ones of
les
Marco,
vôtres individuellement,
yours
je dis bien
individually,
individuellement,
and
parce
I'm
qu'on fait
saying
pas un égrégore,
individually
on n'est pas sur
because
un
we're
égrégore,
not an
attention à
egregore.
ça.
Be careful of this.
Croyez-moi qu'elle s'avoue.
Believe
Croyez-moi
me
que quand vous êtes,
that
quand chacun
when
d'entre nous est
each
dans
and
sa
every
puissance,
one
quand
of us are
chacun
in
de
our
nous
power,
aimer
and that we
avec
emit
force,
with
avec
strength
puissance,
and power,
croyez-moi que
believe
ça
me
sait où
that
aller.
that
Et là, il
knows
n'y a
where
pas
it
besoin
needs
d'adresse
to go.
postale.
And we
Il y a
don't need
pas
an
à-
address.
Non, non, non.
No,
Il y a à
not at
savoir
all.
se
You
positionner.
just need to position
Il y a à
yourself.
savoir
You just need to know how
exiger le
to
respect
ask for
de
respect
notre intégrité
from our
individuelle.
individual
Et c'est ça
integrity.
qui se passe.
And that's what's
Et ça,
happening
c'est
really.
extrêmement
And
puissant.
that's extremely powerful.
Et c'est ce qu'ils craignent. Et c'est
And
pour ça
that's
qu'on peut avoir
what
des
they're-
attaques. C'est pour ça qu'on
That's
peut
why we can
avoir,
have
une
attacks,
part
and
de
that's why
doute.
they're
Mais
scared.
comme on
And
est
that's why we have
affûté
a doubt.
aujourd'hui dans
But now that
l'observation,
we are
dans la
in this
résolution,
observation, in this
intégration
resolution,
et action,
integration and
ça
action,
dure pas des
it doesn't
années.
last for years.
Ça dure
That
plus des
anymore.
années. C'est
It
plus
can't.
possible.
It's not possible anymore.
C'est plus possible.
it's no longer possible.
Et ça nous installe
And
dans
Alex is saying
l'immédiateté de la résolution.
it installs us
Exact.
in the immediately
On
of
constate
the resolution.
quelque
We
chose de
see
dysfonctionnel.
something that is
C'est
dysfunctional.
résolu
It's
quasiment
resolved
instantanément.
almost instantaneously.
Parfois, ça peut prendre un jour, 2 jours,
Céline
mais
says sometimes
ça
it can take
prend
it
pas
1
des
or
plombs
2
ni des
days,
années.
but it doesn't
Voilà,
take
c'est plus
in
possible.
years. It's no
C'est plus
longer
possible.
possible.
On n'en est plus là.
Non,
Alex
ça
is saying we're
explose
not
encore, ouais.
there anymore.
C'est
No,
cramé.
it will be burned,
Sans
Céline
sommation.
says,
Ah oui.
without
Sans
summation.
C'est-à-dire que
Meaning,
Il n'y a pas de deal, pas de compromis.
there's no
Non.
deal or
moi,
control.
c'est pas comme ça que je l'intègre. Il
That's
s'agit pas
not how
de
I
dealer en fait, avec
integrate.
les forces, avec des entités.
You're not dealing with
involutives, on va dire ça comme ça.
entities.
Là, je parlais du deal
I'm going to
entre
speak with a
l'avatar et
deal
son
between the
esprit.
avatar and the
C'est le seul
spirit.
deal que je
It's the only
conçois.
deal that I
Je ne conçois pas
conceive.
autre chose.
I don't conceive
S'agissant
anything
des
else.
entités
But with
qui interfèrent
entities that
dedans,
try to interfere,
manipulatrices,
that are
il n'y a pas
manipulative,
de,
there's
il y a pas de
no
compréhension, à avoir.
comprehension
Il
to
n'y a pas de
have.
sommation.
There's
Il n'y a pas de je te
no,
préviens.
oh,
C'est
I'm
je te crame
preventing you.
direct.
No, I will
Je te
burn
fais
you
exploser
right away,
direct.
and you will
Je
be,
t'annihile
I
directement.
will annihilate
C'est-à-dire que
you,
tu tentes
annihilate you.
d'interférer, tu
If you
tentes
start to
d'entrer dans
interfere,
ma
try
sphère
to interfere
vibratoire.
in my vibrational
Je te
sphere,
dégage, mais de
I
façon
will
radicale.
tell you to leave
Radical.
radically.
Est-ce que tu vois d'autres choses à
You see
ajouter,
something else that you wanted to
par
add,
rapport à ces
Céline,
sujets-là
with that subject?
Bah,
Céline
je-
says,
je pense qu'on a fait
I
le
think
tour.
we've gone around the
Euh,
subject.
Concrètement, non.
Concretely, no.
Je partirai sur un
I
autre
could
sujet encore, donc c'est pas
I
la
could
peine.
start to talk about another subject, but it's not worth it.
Merci
You
à
know
toi,
me.
Céline.
Thank you,
Merci à toi,
Céline.
Alex.
Thank you, Alex.